ready.
Good morning, and thank you so much for taking time to be with us today for our panel, Entrepreneurship Across Differences. As Carol said, I am president of the Aries Charitable Foundation. We are the corporate foundation of Aries Management Corporation, which is a global alternative investment management firm. And we are very much committed to helping advance economic mobility through our focus on career preparation and reskilling, personal finance skill development, and also entrepreneurship. So to start off, I wanted to ask the audience today, how many of you either are an entrepreneur or have ever been an entrepreneur? If we could just see by a show of hands. And how many of you know an entrepreneur? So that's just about everybody in the room here. So what we hope you take away from today are some very valuable insights and some lessons learned about what it takes to make a small business owner successful. And we're particularly focused on underrepresented entrepreneurs, particularly as we think about Sustainable Development Goal 8, which is about economic growth and decent work, and then SDG 10, which focuses on reduced inequalities. So each of our speakers today will talk about a different angle of underrepresented entrepreneurship and the specific needs, the challenges, but also the opportunities that exist to support those business owners, especially as we think about helping those business owners, for example, drive job creation, reduce economic disparities, support community reinvestment, and also to help drive economic mobility, which again is so central to the work that we do at the Aries Foundation. So I am very delighted to introduce our panelists for today. And I want to take a minute to just give the name and title of each of our speakers, but then I want to ask them to talk a little bit about the work that they lead and the organization that they support, the populations that they work on behalf of, what they do to support those populations, and why it matters. So starting at the far end, we have Lyneir Richardson, who is the Assistant Professor of Professional Practice at Rutgers Business School, also Executive Director of the Rutgers Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development, and CEO of the Chicago Trend Corporation. Next to Lyneir is Dr. Louis Olander, who is Director of Research and Veterans Initiatives at Disability Inn. Next to Louis is Jessie Gabriel, who is the founder and managing partner at All Places. And then we have Dr. Roberta Marcenaro, who is founder of iMark Holdings. So Lyneir, if we could start with you to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing. I know you're at Rutgers, but you're also at the Chicago Trend Corporation. And just tell us a little bit about what it is that you do, the organizations in particular that you support, what you're doing to support those organizations, and why it matters.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I have, for the last 11 years, had a dual role. There's a career line in academia called Professor of Professional Practice. And what that means is I get an opportunity to think every day about how to make the research agenda actualized. I lead the Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development. The goal of the center was to connect economic outcomes, economic development agenda items to entrepreneurship. And for the last 18 years, we have worked on getting first-generation entrepreneurs above $1 million a year in annual recurring revenue. As we were doing that work, we now have over, our goal is to get 1,000 entrepreneurs above $1 million of annual recurring revenue. We call it 1,000 times a million is $1 billion. As we were doing that work, we started to really focus in on two things: access to capital, and then ownership. And early on, everyone talked about access to capital, but it was 2020, during the pandemic, right after George Floyd was murdered, that there was this national call for racial wealth gap closing strategies. And we really started to focus on ownership, that wealth is created by owning assets that generate revenue, assets that appreciate over time. And over the last 5 years, we now have over 385 low-wealth individuals who own commercial property in the neighborhoods. And we're starting to get their kids on the investor calls, and they've invested on average $2,200. So we have a whole host of outcomes related to that work, which I'm looking forward to sharing with you. And this is passion work. It is connecting community cohesion, economic development, wealth creation, intentionally in low and moderate income neighborhoods, all together with research and with practice.
Louis, if you could talk a little bit about your work at Disability In.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to see so many CUNY people in the house. As a CUNY person myself, it's always a delight. So Disability In is the leading business nonprofit resource for disability inclusion. Among the many things that we do to support our partners in including people with disabilities is connecting disabled entrepreneurs with procurement opportunities at large corporations. So our DOBE program, Disabled Owned Business Enterprise Program, there are 1,000 businesses we just crossed this month that represent $5 billion in economic impact. And the work that we do to set them up to develop their skills as entrepreneurs through supplier development programs, but also to make those sort of networking connections that allow them to have access to opportunities that they may not have had otherwise.
Jessie.
Hi, Michelle. It's so nice to see you. I'm Jessie Gabriel. I'm founder and managing partner of All Places. We are a boutique law firm. We work with venture capital funds, private equity funds, some large corporations committed to DEI, and some somewhat grown venture-backed startups. Why am I here, right? With that background. We are entirely for-profit, but we are also mission-driven. So we are really focused on gender equity in the capital markets, access to capital, ownership, and really trying to support women who are doing that on the asset management side and on the entrepreneurial side. And I'll say on a personal note, as an entrepreneur myself, it's pretty remarkable sitting in this room at the United Nations and thinking about the opportunities that entrepreneurship brings and really the unlimited opportunities that come with entrepreneurship. As a child of a single parent who was well into my adult life before I realized not everybody got healthcare at the free clinic, this is, it's an incredible perspective expander to think about entrepreneurship. So I share that particularly for the students in the room. Really happy to be here.
And Roberta.
Well, first of all, thank you, Carol, for having me. And this is very exciting because I know that every single of you is a change maker. So it's very nice to be here with you all. I am Roberta Marcenaro, Lyon. I'm born and raised in Italy, and I moved to Washington, D.C. almost 20 years ago. I established iMark Holdings as a boutique consulting firm, mostly focusing on helping Italian companies in the U.S. We've been working in many sectors for architecture, engineering, transportation, automotive, fashion, food, anything relating to made in Italy. During COVID, I felt the urgencies to giving back, and I always knew that education is a fundamental pillar to shake and move the world. And I launched iMark Impact, my own foundation, and I always have a believer that brands can help to drive people, vision, project, challenging. And since then, I created different boxes. One is the GlobalMindED Summit, where Carol came, focusing on help young generation to be inspired by a new method of math and STEM. Also, I launched the Italian Design Week, is a format where I'm inspiring new generation to talking to big designer of Ferrari, designer of Lamborghini, Ducati, Armani, and to be a new generation of designer and student that can change the world through their emotion and transform into a product. and then many other boxes. So I'm a big believer in education. GlobalMindED is the right organization where we can blend my people to Carol people. And again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you to each of you. And I have to say, the work that each of you lead actually is very close to what we are focused on at the Aries Charitable Foundation. Key examples in each of these areas of expertise that you have in some of the initiatives that we funded. And I really appreciate the last panel as well. There was a comment made about creating this equity framework, and I think that each of you certainly represents that when it comes to how we think about entrepreneurship and small business ownership. So Lyneir, I wanted to start with you, particularly the work that you do in urban city centers. And so interesting because last year at this same time, we actually did a walk the block with you and our CEO at Aries in Baltimore, which is an area that's particularly close to his heart, given that he is the owner of the Orioles. So wanted to talk to you a little bit about your efforts around supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs, particularly Black and brown entrepreneurs, and the imperative to help drive economic mobility and wealth creation through a focus on the ownership of commercial real estate. So you started Chicago Trend in 2016. The goal has been to strengthen commercial corridors and to accelerate economic development in urban neighborhoods, and particularly a lot of work being done in shopping centers in urban city markets. And you have over 330 investors. I think you said 385 just now, right? So closer to 400 investors in these projects across the country. So your aspiration is to help reshape the way in which commercial real estate is owned in communities of color, particularly to deliver profits to your investors, but also to create community prosperity. So in your work across the country, in these urban city centers, can you talk a little bit about what you find to be particularly complex or complicated in trying to make these goals actually come to fruition in what have been historically disinvested communities in the inner city, and also how you're able to address some of those challenges through your work?
Oh, thank you. So again, this started as research initially for the MacArthur Foundation, that a commercial property in a neighborhood, the commercial corridor in an urban underserved neighborhood, is your first impression of that neighborhood. And if the commercial property is blighted or disinvested, it becomes a liability. It brings down property values. It can attract crime. Initially, the work was, well, how do we help more entrepreneurs bring more businesses, bring more vitality to the commercial corridors? And the work quickly pivoted to, well, who owns the assets? I sort of coined the phrase that, when was the last time someone ever knocked on your door and said, you want to own something in your neighborhood? And the challenge of the work was to create a structure that is registered with the SEC, right? So it's not it's where we do the due diligence and the financial underwriting and the deal structuring. And we found a fintech tool, it was a crowdfunding platform, that we can register all of the information about the project, the property conditions, the tenant roster, the financial structure, the rent roll. And then marry it with what I call old school community organizing, where we have meetings in church basements, in apartment building common areas, in the public libraries. We have meetings in charter schools. There's a charter school right next to a shopping center we bought in Baltimore. And we had meetings with the parents and the students at breakfast, at lunch, and at dinner, and said, here's how this works, right? And we found a way to democratize ownership so that someone with as little as $1,000 can invest. One of our institutional investors is Penny Pritzker, the former U.S. Commerce Secretary. So some charter school parent or church member, or what's really been increasingly interesting is young students is investing on the same terms as Penny Pritzker's. They're on the telephone calls when we have investor meetings. They're asking questions. What's a rent roll? Why can't we have Chipotle? When are we going to make some money? That kind of stuff, right? And so that the generational change, that even if we're right, people invest with us, they want to earn a financial return, and they want to make the neighborhood better. And even if we're remarkably right, and we'll have, a return on investment that's above 15 or 20% IRR, 5 or 6 X multiple on invested capital. The generational change is now to have 11 and 12-year-olds asking questions from an ownership lens, right? And on the investor calls, just as any analyst would be on the call with a CEO, and seeing an architect and an engineer and an appraiser and a lawyer and the financial guy and the insurance broker, that they're all these careers. That, for us, is what generational wealth creation is, at the same time that we're strengthening neighborhoods. Last thing I'll say, from an ownership perspective, we can be intentionally inclusive. Intentionally inclusive doesn't mean exclusive, but when we hired an architect, we could take an extra step to try to find an architect of color. We've helped now over 23 businesses become UPS store franchises, or open a daycare, or open restaurants. So we can be intentional about creating opportunities for local and minority-owned, black-owned businesses to open. So all of that is the power of ownership. And that's what we're sharing both with students, with their parents, in a way that's driving different outcomes in neighborhoods. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Louis, I want to talk to you a little bit about the imperative to support disabled entrepreneurs, but particularly veterans who are disabled, who are entrepreneurs. And this work is close to our heart because at the Aries Foundation back in 2023, I think it was, we actually funded an organization called Working Nation to do a television program called Breaking Barriers, Embracing Disabilities in the Workforce. So that aired on PBS in Atlanta and actually won an Emmy Award. And so while we looked at disability from a workplace perspective, you're looking at it through the perspective of small business owners. And that's also very interesting to us, particularly because we know that disabled business owners are hiring disabled individuals at a rate that's 10 times higher than other companies. So I was looking at some of the data over the weekend, and I saw that according to the U.S. Census Bureau, veterans owned about 5.4% of the country's 5.7 million employer businesses in the U.S. in 2021, which is about 305,000 businesses. In addition, those businesses generated about $922 billion in revenue, which is about 5.3% of the total $17.4 trillion that was generated by those businesses in 2021. So as we think about, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that these businesses are not only helping small owners be able to launch and scale their own enterprises, but also to create jobs, I wanted to ask you, with all these data in mind, what are some of the specific support mechanisms that you see disabled veterans in particular need to be successful in their business ventures and to help further drive economic mobility, not only for themselves, but also for those they're able to employ?
Yeah, so I was trying to decide whether I should talk about this from disability first or the veteran side first, but I think I'll start with a story. So 20 years ago, I separated from the military this month and moved into public education, and now I'm doing this work supporting entrepreneurs, but also by serendipity ran into a guy who I was deployed to Iraq with, who has been struggling for 20 years to find work, meaningful, powerful, important work. He could get jobs, but something that was going to really use his skill set was elusive. Veterans often come out in this place where they're overqualified for entry-level jobs, but also underqualified for sort of management-level jobs in many cases. And so entrepreneurship allows veterans to bring their incredible transferable skills into the business place, into the business world, in ways that get overlooked when they work for an employer. Similarly, disabled people often move towards entrepreneurship because of the flexibility and the sort of autonomy that entrepreneurship offers. Now, disabled veterans are unlike any population that we can sort of talk about from an equity lens, because disabled veterans are structurally advantaged. a lot of veterans go into entrepreneurship, and a lot of disabled veterans go into entrepreneurship because there are provisions that sort of the future of which sort of remains unclear, but provides opportunities for government contracting. And so, when I got out of the service 20 years ago, there was real dearth of employer programs, but there was an encouragement to consider entrepreneurship because you have advantaged, you have preferential treatment when it comes to government contracting. So a lot of those veteran-owned businesses sell directly to the government. Now, our veteran-owned businesses and our disabled-owned businesses are primarily business-to-business companies that do a lot of work, especially in the professional services sector, also in construction. 40% of them are disabled veterans. And one of the sort of interesting dimensions to this, to sort of come to the question about what can we actually do to support them, is the question of stigma. Anytime we talk about disability, the conversation about stigma needs to be addressed. Among veterans, there's a particular salience because 80% of veterans who will say, I'm a veteran with disability, will say that I'm not a person with a disability. I'm going to say that again because it's kind of wild when you slow it down, right? So if you ask a question, you say, are you a veteran with a disability? People say yes. 80% of those people who say yes will say, no, I'm not a person with a disability, right? So we have a number of profound barriers in the disabled veteran community around how do we think about disability, how do we think about what we still have to offer the world. But then, of course, the main challenges, aside from that, are the same things that affect entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs across the board. Access to capital, again, remains sort of a perennial struggle for disabled veteran entrepreneurs and disabled entrepreneurs. Access to contracting opportunities, especially in the B2B space for disabled civilian entrepreneurs. So those are really the main sort of things, and in a lot of ways they're not different from the barriers that other entrepreneurs face. I'll also say, because this is very important to me as somebody who's thought a lot about equity as a public school teacher, and this political moment that we're sitting in. I look and I think a lot about how the privileged place that veterans enjoy politically, how that can be leveraged in service of the many groups that they also represent, right? So veterans and disabled people are Black, they are women, they are Hispanic, they are, right? And you could fill in any group in that. And so a lot of my thinking around what do we do with disabled veterans because they're structurally advantaged is to think about how those structural advantages can get applied across the board. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Thank you. Jessie, obviously your work is close to my heart as well because we have funded women who are involved in entrepreneurship programming and endeavors. We work, for example, with the Acceleration Project to support single mothers who are entrepreneurs, but also with Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement, ASE, to support Latina entrepreneurs across the country. And so much of the work that you do is centered around the private markets, which is also really at the heart of what Aries as a firm is all about. So I wanted to talk to you about the economic imperative, particularly to support women who are entrepreneurs and some of the upstream and downstream effects that private funds can help on supporting women entrepreneurs. So we think about the fact that your organization provides guidance, counsel, advice to private funds, for example, around the legalities for making credit arrangements and also their acquisition activities, working with portfolio companies. And I wanted to ask you particularly, though, about the legal counsel that All Places gives to private funds that can help protect and advance women who are entrepreneurs, especially knowing that only about 2% of venture capital is controlled by women. So how are you working with the other 98% of VC owners to ensure that they're making more than appropriate investments in women who are pursuing their own small business goals?
Yeah, so I think I'll start this off by saying that one of the things that I hope you take away from our conversation up here is that there are a lot of different ways to have impact in this space. Some ways that are not immediately obvious, right? How does a for-profit law firm have impact in this space, right? So my background is as a big law lawyer. I was in big law for 15 years. I was an equity partner. I launched the investment funds practice at my last firm. And I was sharing this with someone earlier this morning, with Amy, who's out there somewhere, that I was in this position. It was okay. I was making really good money, which from a background of financial insecurity is incredibly important. I didn't feel particularly fulfilled. And then my dad died. And these big moments in life cause you to reevaluate how you spend your time, how you use your skills. And I launched All Places a year later. And one of the exciting things about entrepreneurship is that you get to create it from scratch. You get to create exactly what you want. So I took this model of big law, which I thought was terrible, and created a new way of providing legal support that someone recently described as legal support without all of the things that you hate about working with lawyers, right? And that's a better model for everyone, right? So it's better for everybody. But who we wanted to work with most was women. And we wanted to work with them because having a great lawyer can make a huge difference for your business, right? It's important all the time, but it's critical sometimes, particularly when you're growing and you look back and think, wow, if I'd made a different decision, I wouldn't own 5% of my business, I'd own 50% of my business, or 50% of that piece of property. And that makes a big difference. So working with us, we're excellent. I'm aware when I say that it's unpalatable to some people to hear women and people of color talk with that confidence, but we are excellent. So working with us really provides a leg up to whoever we choose to work with. And we want to provide that leg up to women and to people who are not women, but who are aligned with our values. So getting back to your question, how does the work that we do change those numbers? So when a woman comes to us who's running a venture capital fund and she gets to work with us in partnership to protect her interests, to protect her employees, to protect their companies, to make them likely more profitable, we are in that way growing the assets that are being managed by women. Right now, less than 1% of assets in the asset management world are managed by women. It's an industry that manages over $70 trillion. Less than 1% are being managed by people of color, right? So we think about what the world would look like, what this country would look like if those numbers were different. It would probably look a lot different, right? Our priorities might be a lot different than they are now. So that's what we do. We're growing it so that, we've mentioned too, when you have ownership in a category, that category tends to employ that category, right? So when we have more women managing money, statistically, those women are more likely to invest in women who are starting companies, who are growing companies. Those companies are more likely to develop solutions for women who are experiencing those problems. And that, incrementally changes things.
Thank you. And then Roberta, last but certainly not least, I wanted to talk to you about the work that you're doing, particularly to foster international collaboration when it comes to entrepreneurship. And what you do, of course, is so important to us as well at the Aries Foundation, because the work that we fund, the initiatives that we support, are global in reach. We support programming not only in the US, but across Asia and throughout Europe. So really interested to talk to you today about this imperative around international collaboration when it comes to business ownership. So we do know that it helps, for example, to drive innovation because it helps to bring together diverse perspectives, expand market reach by navigating new territories, and it also helps to build a competitive advantage through access to global talent and resources. And also, we should point out that collaboration across international boundaries and borders can help startup and small businesses access funding, share risk, and also develop the kinds of cultural nuances that help to facilitate business and industry. So the importance of your work has certainly always been evident, but I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what makes the work that you're leading and your efforts particularly imperative now, given this particular point of time in which we find ourselves?
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Besides to be an entrepreneur, I cover some position like for the American Chamber of Commerce. I represent for the state in DC and Texas. There is also a council between Italy and the US has been established by Rockefeller and Hermano, that was the big CEO of our group Fiat, and TBIC. All the work I've done is creating this transatlantic asset, and specifically, as I said before, between my country, Italy, and my other country, US. First of all, I don't know if you know, but Italian, they are very bad in collaborating with others. So they are creative, they are amazing, but they don't know how to collaborate. Because I always say in Italy, we have one little bone and 2,000 dogs. So more than collaborate, they try to fight. That's why I have also this motivation every day when I wake up. So I always felt it was kind of my mission to pull up together my words to create, of course, an impact. And as I mentioned before, I have some bridges that they are very operative, but they bring together from politicians, government, public, private companies, cross-sectoral companies, students, non-profit organizations. That is the power of collaboration, I think, is the diversity of the differentiation of the sectors where you create a vibe. Right now, you know, with AI, there will come in the markets many tools where collabs can finally be visualized in 3-4 dimensional and will make our work easier. But although all these tools, they will exist, we are the only one as a human being that feel emotions. We are the only one can really make the difference in collabs. And we are the only one that through emotion we can make projects. And I do believe that soft skills right now and in the future for other students and young generation, they can really make the difference because they will get more, you know, skills through AI. But how about the soft skills, communications, and the values? So right now, for me, collaboration is all about to resile to the values into the projects. And I think future generation, they need to work on values together with their soft skills to make even bigger collaboration and elevate their life and so their organization that they work with.
Thank you. I want to give each of you a chance to, give some reflections, talk about how to get involved with your work, certainly to share some closing remarks. But before we do that, I did want to open it up to the audience in case there are questions, particular queries or comments that you'd like to make in response to what our panelists have shared with us this morning. Any questions of anyone? I think there's one in the, did I see someone in the back?
I was just going to say, in the meantime, because I realized I had an anecdote and I started it, but I didn't finish it, about the guy who I was in the Army with. He got so frustrated with job searching that he went out, started his own business, and he is thriving right now. He spent years and years hitting the streets, trying to prove his worth to employers, and the moment where things shifted for him and he gained sort of control over, I think he would say control over his own life, was that moment where he took a leap to entrepreneurship and was able to bring his full skill set to his work instead of some subset of it all the time.
That's great. Wonderful to hear. And before we come back to that, any questions or comments from anyone in the room?
Hey, Michelle, at table 2, this gal raised her hand. You want to stand up?
Yeah.
We'll get you maybe a mic because you're right in front there. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Barani and I'm from Hostos Community College. I really like when Jessie Gabriel mentioned that her company is like to support women, the entrepreneurs. And like for me, it is very important that, I'm sorry, it is very important that your company is about supporting women that come from scratch, because in a world like this, you know, they always look down to the women. So it is important that us as women show our empowerment and that we know how valuable we are for the society. So thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments? There's one over here.
I have a concern as an entrepreneur who has 19 companies that young people today all believe, become an entrepreneur, Elon Musk, you've got money and you're done. What are we going to do to help them sustain, go through the trial, go through the description? He just has somebody on the road all the time trying to find business, which is what it takes. But the young people don't see that today. So I'm concerned, and you're a very distinguished panel, so please give us some ideas.
Yeah, I have a thought on that as an entrepreneur. They will find out how hard it is as soon as they start. Yeah. Sorry, that's a little negative, but being an entrepreneur is tough, man. I mean, you have to desperately believe in what you're doing, because day after day after day, it is hard. Highest highs and lowest lows. I would never go back to Big Law, ever. But this is a much harder job. But I hear you. Yeah, I hear you.
There's a host now of entrepreneurship capacity building programs at literally every level. College, university, government, nonprofit. And I actually think people find their place to learn how to form a business, how to create an investment thesis, how to raise capital, how to make the case for your company, how to identify customers, how to create a business model. And I think there's tremendous value in those programs. Again, that's the work that we started to lead at Rutgers, right? And there was a period where I started feeling like there were so many programs that were how to start a business, how to grow, how to create a business model, that I started to feel like we were missing capital. And then, you know, a real thought of what does it mean to own assets that have some passive income opportunity. So I started to think, well, look, all this training without capital is like workforce development training without a job, right? So we really started leaning into, all right, you got a strategy, you've been to a pitch competition, you've heard from a number of entrepreneurs who can tell the stories about how hard it is. And there's no doubt about it, right? Part of our capacity building programs are really around telling people, how do you know when to pivot, and how do you make the case, and you know the challenges of the hours and the financial risk associated with it. I mean, so truly is not for the faint of heart. But you know, with someone that has a vision and passion and the grit and the risk-taking, you know, preference, you know, obviously there's some rewards for it as well.
Well, the big question has always been, did you born entrepreneur or you become? Who do you believe is you? Did you born or do you become? So if you become, the passion should be your drive. And I think you have to be unstoppable as a personality. And the problem right now is, you know, to find those alter ego. They want to follow the visionary behind to be unstoppable. And unstoppable means, every second you want to tell the story. You want a storyteller of your company. And you don't sleep, you are at lunch, you are at breakfast, on the train, it doesn't matter. For certain type of people, it matters to stop to work. And I think that's why you are not an entrepreneur.
There's a question here in the corner. You need a mic?
You want to get a mic and come forward? Thank you.
Thanks. I'm sorry about that. I'm loving this conversation. I'm an entrepreneur myself, and a 23-year-old IT company, and I'm also a veteran, a disabled veteran. And in Denver, I operate a incubator for BIPOC-led and serving entrepreneurs. I call them entrepreneurs, BIPOC-led and serving nonprofits specifically. I'm wondering if you see nonprofit founders and operators as entrepreneurs, and if so, do you have programs for them as well?
I'll add very quickly. So, when I think about the work we do in our shopping center work, we really formed it out of research around social entrepreneurship, right? I still believe at its core, even, when I first started thinking and doing research around social entrepreneurs, I've started with what's the definition of an entrepreneur, right? Someone who has a vision, who forms a strategy, who takes a financial risk with the hope of making a profit, right? Now, in the nonprofit category, I kept thinking, well, with the hope of making a profit. I think in the nonprofit arena, it's with the hope of creating a sustainable enterprise that can achieve the charitable purpose of the work. So as we work with entrepreneurs who really I want to help more veterans earn businesses. I want to create opportunities for formerly incarcerated individuals. I want to help women entrepreneurs grow. I want to own property, but do it in a way where there's democratized ownership. The goal still has to be a business model that's self-sustaining at some point, which in for-profit, it's like we're generating a profit, right? In nonprofit context, I think that really means we're generating enough income, whether it's earned income or continuation of grant income, that allows it to be self-sustaining. Because here's what I know about entrepreneurship. That if it's not profitable and it's not self-sustaining, you can run out of passion, right? And so at some point you see people like, man, I've been struggling forever. I can't figure it out. So our real goal in our instruction is how to help folks who have a vision and a passion be able to generate enough revenues to sustain that work.
And I'll just dovetail that by saying, and certainly, Louie, I want to give you a chance to weigh in as well because of the work that you do, particularly around certification for disabled veterans. At the Aries Foundation, we look across the spectrum at types of programming that we can support and get involved with, whether it's direct delivery of programming for training, for example, or whether it's research where we are helping to inform others and think about informing policy and influencing practice so that it has a long-range systemic effect when it comes to populations that we're trying to help. So in terms of your question, in terms of, would this be something viable for nonprofits, we do recognize and appreciate that there are many entrepreneurs who are starting these organizations for social good and for purposes to benefit others. What we're looking at the foundation is the work that you're leading helping to drive economic mobility? Is it helping others, for example, to access jobs? Is it helping to reinvest in communities? Is it helping people to really reach their full potential? And so when we support nonprofits, we ask them at the outset, what do you wish you had funding to do that you don't currently have funding for? Or what are you currently doing that you want to iterate on or scale up? And how can we add unique value to your work? And so depending on what that looks like, we come together and we look at how can we fund something that's meaningful, but also measurable and can be sustained over the long period. So we do think of nonprofit startups akin to for-profit startups. and how we think about our funding, because we also, to your point, Lyneir, want to think about the fact that what we're helping to create has the potential to go the distance and to be impactful over a period of time to benefit others. And Louis, I wanted to ask you also to please weigh in, given the work that you're doing around certifying disabled veterans.
Yeah. So currently we certify disabled-owned businesses because so much of our work comes out of the supplier diversity wealth building paradigm. But it's a really important and interesting question, especially since so much in the disability employment world goes through social enterprises that are not necessarily owned by disabled people, but employ many disabled people. So it's a very, very important question, and sort of a related question is companies that primarily provide services and support for disabled people, but may not be owned by disabled people. So I think this question of like entrepreneurship and our networks and how we connect businesses to opportunities has often gone through this older supplier diversity paradigm, which as it, I don't know, I want to say sunset. I don't think that's the right word, but I'm going to say it for now. But as it changes, I think there's a real opportunity to bring in nonprofits into the entrepreneurship fold in ways that we hadn't thought about before. I think there are opportunities to think about who serves who and how we bring all those folks into the fold, and especially because disability cuts across so many other social categories, the ways in which disability-owned businesses or folks who employ people with disabilities or folks who employ veterans or veteran-owned businesses, that whole range, how we can build connections to sustain some of the progress and some of the things that have been accomplished over the last 5 or so years through collaboration across those social indicators and across those social groups.
And I know we only have about 5 minutes left, and I think where you left off talking about collaboration is a great place to pick up as I ask each of you to just give your closing comments, reflections, and also if you want to share any opportunities to get involved with your work, please feel free to do that as well. So since we ended off on collaboration, Roberta, and since that is your expertise, and Louis just mentioned collaboration, we'd love to ask you to start with leading us in just our closing reflections.
So as I said before, I think right now is all about human being together. So, and I said before that we need a platform like GlobalMindED. That's why I created the GlobalMindED Summit. I created Italian Design Week. I created a lecture of the Iliad together. Will happen next year on June 26th. I'm creating platform because they have to be dialogues. They never end. People, they need to convene with their values, and that's where you can form new collaborations through people, through human beings. But as I said, a platform that does reside to a brand, I think has the power to create also the passion to work in a nonprofit. Because now you know all with the socials, they want to say, I've been there, I relate into these brands. And the brand is about, as I said, a platform, like can be GlobalMindED, those are mine, the GlobalMindED Summit, the China Design Week, and others. So I think collaboration has to have a place to be, and the collaboration has to bring people together that have the same values, as I said it before. And there has to be this comfort zone space where actually you go out of your comfort zone. So I really like also, as I said before, the cross-sectional or the fact you can be blend with people that don't really belong to your industries, because that's where the vibe come out. Because we love lawyers, but if you go to a lawyer conference, or if you love medical, but if you go in a med conference, they are extremely boring. I don't go. But if you blend doctor together with visionary in design and designer together with architects or engineering or math pro, that's where the magic is happening, I think.
So I guess my last 2 comments. One is, you know what I said before, which is that I guess I'm up here as the purely for-profit representative, but for-profit is a great frontier for impact. I think Aries is such an excellent example of this. You can have a for-profit arm that considers impact in its work, that talks openly about diversity, equity, inclusion, and can also then use that wealth to generate a not-for-profit arm too. So it's just, there are a lot of ways to come at this. The other thing I would say is, we've been talking here mostly about small businesses, but let's also talk about large businesses, right? On more underrepresented founders, creating large businesses. That would be spectacular. I hope that's where we're going, that we're focusing on every single level. We don't just want to play small like we've often been told to do. We also really want to play big.
Thank you. So I think I'll start by answering the second question first about ways to engage. I think some of you who I've had a chance to talk to know that I worked in public education for a long time, and now I'm in this space. One of the amazing differences is how much less inertia there is, right? In public education, there's tremendous inertia to do anything. And many people in this room know that far better than I do. I have been astounded in this work at the creative, innovative thinking that folks bring to the table, but more so with the action that people put behind it. So, if you are interested in supporting veterans with disabilities as entrepreneurs, if you're interested in supporting people with disabilities as entrepreneurs, let's talk. Because the number of possibilities feels very hard to wrap your mind around, and whatever it is, there are also new opportunities springing up every day. So I'll stop there.
Three things. So I mentioned that we own 6 shopping centers. We're about to buy our 7th. We have our 8th under contract. We have 385 low and moderate income community investors. We want to grow that to 1,000. We own $40 million of real estate with community. We'd like to get to $100 million. We'd like to get to $1 billion. 3 ways you can support that work. We formed a fund. The investors are large, philanthropically motivated impact investors. I mentioned the MacArthur Foundation and the Pritzker Childbirth Foundation, Chicago Kresge. My favorite group of investors, I presented at a panel like this, and they were a group of nuns, and they took one meeting and invested $500,000. I'm like, I got to meet more nuns, right? They got to hang out in different crowds. So 2, if there's any impact-oriented capital, we have with due diligence ready. We form the fund. We have a data room. We have legal opinions that say it meets the charitable purpose test. We're taking investments from institutional investors of $1 to $5 million. Secondly, when I mentioned 385 people and individuals, they've invested on average $2,200. So if you want to see young people think about ownership in a different way, understand what a financial statement is, be on investor calls, there's opportunities to do $1,000 or $2,000 support to make that work. And then finally, the charity. We do have a for-profit and a nonprofit, and the grant making we receive is around doing financial education, doing community outreach. That work is only funded by philanthropy, to take the time. I call it urgent but patient, to be patient, to go and say, here's what a rent roll is, and to meet with the PTA at 7 a.m. and at 7 p.m. or meet in the church basement on a Saturday morning. That's intentionality. So I hope we have more young people and more people of color, and that communities get stronger because we have this inclusive wealth building strategy. And I'm inviting you all to join us and participate.
So Lyneir, Louie, Jessie, Roberta, thank you so much, and thank you to all of you as well. Great panel and wonderful insights. Thank you.
Awesome. Let's give them another round of applause. And also look up the Aries Foundation and the Aries Corporation, because they do incredible work, not just in the things Michelle referenced today, but also in the areas of climate and under-resourced communities. So they're just a wonderful organization, and we'll make sure you get to meet Michelle.